Members and officers, so I think we'll make a start, please. So may I welcome all members and officers to this hybrid meeting of the Cross-Cutting Resources and Business Overview and Scrutiny Committee. This meeting is able to be viewed live by members of the press and public today. Therefore, may I welcome anyone that may be watching remotely. A recording of this meeting will be made available on the Council's webcasting and YouTube channels after the meeting has concluded, should anyone else also wish to view it. Please be aware that this meeting is being transcribed only for the purpose of producing the minutes. The transcript will be deleted once the committee approves the minutes. The transcript should not be downloaded by anyone other than Democratic Services. To confirm, as a council, we welcome the use of the Welsh language within our public meetings, but I can confirm that I've not received any notification or request to use Welsh today. Therefore, the meeting will be conducted in English only. May I remind members to refrain from using the chat facility and instead use the raised hand icon to indicate when you wish to speak. Please could you also keep your microphone muted when not speaking so there aren't any interruptions. Can I also remind members that as per statutory guidance made under Section 4 of the Local Government Wales Measure 2011 and formally adopted hybrid meeting policy here, any member attending a meeting remotely must be able to be seen and heard by the members and officers who are attending the meeting, as well as by members of the public viewing the meeting. So can I please ask you use your cameras for the duration of the meeting? And so moving on to the agenda. Niall, could you confirm if we received any apologies?
Yeah, afternoon, Chair. We've received apologies from Councillors Colette Thomas and Nathan Yole.
Thank you very much. So item 2 is the declarations of interest. Can I ask members to state whether they have any declarations of interest to make, please? I see no hands, so I think we're okay there. So item 3 is the action sheet. So could members confirm if they have any questions? There was only one item on the action sheet, which is on page 3. So you all happy to note that? Yep, that's great. So we move then to the substantive part of the agenda. So the Torfaen deal. This report provides the members with the opportunity to scrutinise, challenge, influence and make suggestions to the ongoing communications and engagement strategy for the Council's deal with the community. And it provides members with an update on outputs from the deal survey and the deal citizen assemblies that have taken place, as well as next steps. So can I firstly welcome the leader, Stephen Vickers, who's present in the chamber, Neil Jones, Lewis Haynes from Local Partnerships, who's joining us online, and 2 members of the Citizens Assembly, David Thompson and Elizabeth Aston, who are here with us in the chamber, members. There'll be an opportunity. They'll explain a little bit about their role after Neil has introduced the report. So I'm going to hand over to the leader and who's online, and Stephen and Neil to introduce the report. So I don't know, is that going to be Neil? Yep. Okay, I'll pass on to Neil. Thank you very much, Neil. Sorry, members, we're looking to get the microphone working.
Good afternoon, councillors. I will introduce the latest report on the deal today, and you've been sent a number of appendices to support the report. Through regular executive team engagement with heads of service and managers across the organisation, the deal mindset has already started to influence the business of the Council, and this can be seen in the delivery plan report that you will scrutinise later. First, before we start, I'd like to invite the leader just to say a few words regarding the citizens' assemblies. Leader.
Yeah, thanks, Neil. I just wanted to say how good it was to be able to attend 2 of those Citizens' Assemblies events. A big thank you to the members of staff who facilitated those sessions, because I think they were really valuable. It was great to get the active engagement from a deliberately varied and unique group of residents, and the sort of the positive, engaged but sort of keen response from people who genuinely care about our communities and want to play a part in helping improve them. The last thing I just wanted to say is we made a promise to that group of people to keep them engaged and updated on the progression of our efforts on the deal, including hopefully getting them back together in a year's time to talk more about the progress we've made, where they've seen a positive difference and where they haven't. That honest dialogue and engagement, I think, is very important going forward to test what we do and the impact that it has. And back to Neil.
Thank you, Leader. So the report before you starts with our key messages and contains the vision and aim of the deal. The vision is for a future without inequality, where everyone thrives in a fair, inclusive and resilient community. And the aim of the deal is to create lasting change by building trust, fostering shared responsibility and driving innovation through strong collaboration between the Council, residents and partners. This is why the deal underpins the transformation strategy across Torfaen and is deeply aligned with the Marmot principles, which is the lens through which we'll reduce health inequalities across the borough. Members' recommendations from the last scrutiny meeting have informed our approach to engagement, our language and our communication around the deal. The purpose of this report today is to give the committee the opportunity to continue to scrutinise, challenge, influence and make suggestions to the ongoing communications and engagement strategy for the deal. It's also to provide councillors with an update on feedback from the deal survey and from the residents via the deal Citizens' Assembly, and to consider next steps for the deal. As background in the report outlines that the deal is part of our 3-pronged approach to, how as Stephen would describe it, racing a different race to address the needs of our community. As a reminder, Torfaen and Blaen y Gwent are the first councils in Wales to make the Marmot Principles our core purpose, the first councils in Wales to federate, resulting in joint offices and closer working with Blaen y Gwent, and the first councils in Wales to embark on a deal with residents, which is the mindset that aims to build trust and shared responsibility. Underpinning the deal are the 5 missions in 3.2 of the report, which will be the strategic drivers of transformation, plus our principles in 3.3 of co-production, prevention first and empowerment. As per scrutiny's recommendations, these missions have been tested with multiple stakeholders and have evolved. Point 4 of the report starts with the detail and headlines from the deal survey, which concluded at the end of 2025. Residents were invited to take part in the deal survey on the Council's engagement platform Get Involved. More of the detail of the executive summary can be found in Appendix 1. The Torfaen Deal survey page opened from the 3rd of November 2025 and the summary report was generated on the 5th of January 2026. In that time, there were 2,026 visits to the project page and 299 completed surveys. There were 741 clicks on specific pages and 177 ideas added to the ideas board. Also during this period, 5 Get Involved newsletters were sent specifically on the deal to the 900 residents signed up for Get Involved newsletters. In the survey, we asked residents what they value. They told us the community spirit and friendly neighbours, the shops, the amenities, the green spaces such as parks, canals and the boating lake. We asked residents what they wanted most fixed. They told us cleaner streets, more bins, better weed control, clean-ups after collections, better parking enforcement, dealing with antisocial behaviour. They wanted more for young people, youth services, clubs and activities, and better public transport in town centres, and better street lighting on streets, paths and parks. We asked residents what they were ready to do to help. They said litter picking, keeping areas tidy, litter picks while out walking, tidying verges, sweeping shared areas, volunteering time in warm hubs, charity shops, food banks, community halls and at events, neighbourliness, looking out for elderly, disabled neighbours, being a good neighbour, improving green spaces through planting and seeding, reporting issues and supporting local parking enforcement. They also told us the main barriers were their own limited time, their own health, their own mobility, that they were unsure what to do, how to help and where to get information, which was a recurring theme in the citizens' assemblies, and a view there's also a view that the council should do it. We asked residents what positive outcomes they expect. They thought if we do this, we'd have better community cohesion, better health and well-being, safer, cleaner streets, improvements in the local economy, better youth opportunities, better road safety. We asked what people liked about where they lived, and they said their community spirit, friendly neighbours. They said they re-emphasised those shops, those amenities, the green spaces, and they liked the free parking in the borough. We asked people what frustrated them. Cemeteries came up, along with perceived poor leadership or misprioritisation of spend, that there were areas of neglect or underinvestment, citing town centres looking run down, and taxes and costs came up, concerns about council tax levels and value for money. We also asked people to describe how they live their lives, and out of that came that they have an enjoyment and a pride for where they live, but some people were isolated and felt lonely. Lots of people already involved in community activities and volunteering, and they certainly enjoyed the leisure spaces of the borough, taking opportunities to walk, dog walking, and again they reference those friendly neighbours. Point 4 of the report covers the details of our citizens' assemblies. The assemblies took place in January and February, facilitated by local partnerships. We have Lewis Haynes online today from local partnerships joining us, and there's more detail in Appendix 2. The Citizens' Assembly concluded on the weekend, so that report is still to be concluded itself, and with the outcomes of Saturday's workshops. So the Citizens' Assemblies, they're an established process to help capture the experiences that are not always heard and empower residents to have their say in shaping the future. 12,000 households were contacted, with Sortition managing the recruitment and selection process. From the hundreds of people who expressed interest, 40 were selected, representing a cross-section of the borough from different parts of the borough and different demographics. During the 3 sessions, participants were being asked to address the question, what principles should guide the new relationship and ways of working to deliver our shared ambition for the borough? The format for each session was to hear evidence from local partners and community groups, debate and discuss the findings relating to their own experience, reach a consensus on the key points to be presented back to the council and the community to form future policy and ways of working. Over the course of the 3 weekends, we had various attendees and speakers, including the Leader of the Council, Councillor Hunt, Chief Executive, Stephen Vickers, Professor Tracy Daskovich, the Director of Public Health in Gwent, Amy Morris, Chief Executive Officer for the Torvine Voluntary Alliance, Ron Ford, representing local litter picking groups, Scott Rolfe, Chief Executive Officer from Halo Leisure, Catherine Love, Chief Executive Officer from Bronavon Community Housing, Dave Leach, Deputy Chief Executive, Jason O'Brien, Strategic Director for Children and Families, and Councillor David Williams in his role as Scrutiny Chair. The first day very much set out the context of the deal and the challenges facing the borough. The second day built on the common themes to consider how the borough's vision can be shaped to deliver long-lasting benefits. It was this day that really started to inform the principles, continuing to hear evidence of real-life experiences. The final assembly took place last Saturday, as I mentioned, and aimed to synthesise together all of the findings, the knowledge and experience to finalise the principles of the deal. Although there was some robust discussion on the tables, the assemblies overwhelmingly approved the principle of the emerging principles. However, the feedback was that the language they were written in requires a little bit more wordsmithing, not to rewrite them, but to put them into a language more suitable to describing to their next-door neighbour. We will undertake this work and share back with the Assembly members. Hot off the press today, the Assembly principles that we've had back was Principle 1, to work with communities, not for them. Principle 2, to use a wide range of communication. Principle 3, to build trust through accountability. Principle 4, to strengthen community ownership and collective responsibility. Principle 5, to empower communities through partnerships. Principle 6, to minimise barriers to participation. And Principle 7, to pursue environmental sustainability. Under each one of those principles, there is a description, and it's some of that that I think is where we need to wordsmith and get a better approval from our Assembly members. On each one of those, Assembly members voted, and it was, for each one, roughly 28 yeses and 1 no, apart from Principle 4, which had 24 yeses and 5 noes. But other than that, overwhelmingly supported. In point 5 of the report, we come to consultation, and we set out our multi-layered engagement approach. This was to develop the Torfaen deal. It was vital to engage many key stakeholders. A good selection of assets have also been created to raise awareness of the deal, including posters, flyers, slide decks for PowerPoint, e-bulletins, Teams backgrounds, email signatures, easy-read documents, and hopefully scrutiny members have had the opportunity to look at a few of the video case studies that we developed with local community groups. Those were also shared into the citizens' assemblies as they paint a really good portrayal of what communities are already working with us together on various projects. In the report, we then outline staff engagement, which has been extensive, public engagement, again, a broad range of ways to engage the public, the forums and community groups we've been to, member engagement, and today I checked, there's been 11 items in the members' missive alone on the deal, partner engagement and external engagements. Finally, business engagement is about to kick off with a BGT deal for business in the making, and the team are going to attend a number of business events at key locations. Item 6 of the report takes you through the implications and risks, of which there are not many implications and risks. The greatest risk probably is not fulfilling our commitment to our communities to embark on the deal. And item 7 on the report points to some of the emerging actions and ideas proposed. We are already working on our next batch of community-led case studies, including an excellent project at Blenheim Road School, our play service, and a community initiative at Pantygassic Park. We're working with partners, or we will be working with partners, to deliver a deal volunteering campaign. Certainly our assemblies fed back, they want lots more information on the opportunities that exist in our communities, and we'll find a way of making sure we get more promotion of all those opportunities. We'll communicate the deal, ways of working through our delivery plans. So those delivery plans already highlight in deal ways of working. We'll follow and promote. There has been deal policy reviews. I mentioned the deal for business that is underway with our business teams, and to monitor the mission delivery plans. There was also some ideas discussed in the Assembly. One was for a deal community A to Z of services and groups, so we'll look at working on that with partners. We're looking to support a deal volunteering summer roadshow with council partners and community groups. We're looking to capture deal pledges from the community, people who say, yeah, they wish to be part of the deal, and we know we've got lots of groups already working in this way. And some emerging thoughts on how we engage our disabled community. I attended the Torfaen Access Forum who gave some really valuable feedback on how disabled people have barriers to participate in that we've got to think about in all our activities, and any other sectors involved. And item 8 are the recommendations for scrutiny activity. And that concludes my report.
Okay, thank you very much, Neil. Perhaps we could open it up to our Citizens' Assembly representatives. David and Elizabeth, are you happy to say a little bit about how you got involved?
David has said I was one of the 12,000 households that were contacted. So when the mail came through, it was just an opportunity to get involved. A lot of people are happy just to sit there and moan about things, but I feel as if you don't, stand up and get involved and put your points across, then there's no good complaining about things afterwards. So it was an opportunity to go along, see what was being presented, and maybe get involved, speak to like-minded people from different areas of Torfaen, and sort of brainstorm ideas and come up with a way forward where maybe the council and residents can work together. So that was my initial feelings behind it. Some of the older councillors may remember my father, Graham Thompson, who was a member of Torfaen Council for many, many years on the Parks and Cemetery side. So it was nice to give a little bit back for Dad and get involved. So he's very pleased that I got the opportunity to come along today and say a few words. But yeah, I must admit I found the whole process very, very interesting. And the key takeaway was that there's already so much going on in the community, but we just don't know about it. And I think that's where we need to make a difference. We need to publicise these things and get the message out there. And it's how we do that going forward.
That's great. Thank you, David. Do you want to say anything as well?
I became involved in the same way as David. And I did a sort of few points as an overview, really, of my experience, because I've not been involved in a setup like this before, where basically the whole of the group had such an open say and collaboration and working together. So at the moment, I feel the Citizens' Assembly has enabled a group of people, all of us randomly selected, to come together, and through the presentations, videos and participants' experience, which was done mainly on day 1, we were able to discuss ways and means of developing the 5 mission statements underpinning this task. In the first meeting, it was evident that there are many, many support groups throughout Torfaen and the boroughs generally, but as both speakers have said, not everybody knows about a fraction of them really, and worse than that, if they did know, they didn't always know how to get involved. And communication, I think, for all of our groups was the first main point that we all said, and that's already been addressed. At the meeting I went to on Saturday, the last day, there was leaflets showing, and I thought, naively at the time, it was from what we'd said, but obviously there'd been a lot more going on prior to our days. And that's already coming together, and that's going to be a big help in the community, because definitely people are looking out there. They want to help. A lot of the people said they would get involved. Different age groups, different experiences, but having said that, a lot of people felt there was something they could do and would have been willing to do. So there was a lot of discussion of the importance of the communication and getting the message out there. And everybody agreed that there was a need to develop this. And as I said, it already seems it's coming along at quite a speed. From my own perspective, as an individual in the group, because obviously I can't speak for everybody, to be honest, until today, David and I have never had a conversation because...
It shows how randomly selected he was.
Randomly and working on different groups. We hadn't crossed paths, and now we're both here at this meeting. But from my perspective, I felt everybody was able to contribute and discuss their point of view. The tasks were focused and led to animated discussion. And that discussion at times got quite heated, but nobody, certainly not in my experience there, ever felt they couldn't say what they wanted to say. Some of the points that perhaps were a bit heated were from experience in years past, and wanting, you know, to see an improvement for everybody. But other than that, I really felt it was very openly, people spoke. And I think as a team, we felt valued. I think, and that's the approach that's come from Torfaen County Borough Councils. They valued the people there and what they presented to us. And because I didn't know anything about the Citizens' Assembly prior to coming, I'd looked online at a couple of others that had been established in different parts of the world. And I felt that the procedure was exactly the same as I'd been reading, even though I knew nothing about anybody else's other than some of the results. As a whole initiative commitment, I felt the focus and commitment was from all staff there, and in particular the County Borough staff. You could see they were really highly invested in this. I don't know how long it's been going on, but certainly they were on board, and you could see that they were leading and willingly participating in that. And I think that came through at every stage for me.
Definitely, yeah.
Yes. A lot of time and energy had already been invested in this initiative, and obviously over a period of time. So whereas I initially thought I was going into day one of whatever was to come, I was really, really surprised and pleasantly surprised to see this is part of an ongoing thing, which I hope will develop and grow. We had a lot of good practice examples, and this ranged from self-help, small-scale initiatives, a lot in the boroughs, which could have been implemented and were being implemented via the council, resident and community groups, through to partnerships with the health and well-being services, businesses, and where possible, voluntary groups. Now, I think having this expertise right at the beginning, from day one, and particularly through the videos and the exemplar groups that we were told about, even though we hadn't met them, you knew that these things were happening. And I think that came through very strongly, and it does motivate the people who were there then. They want to get involved, and so many people said, didn't they, David?
Yeah.
You know, well, I wouldn't mind having a go at that, but, you know, you don't know where to start. Or very often that was the case. And my last point in here is the interaction. I briefly mentioned Torfaen. I felt the communication was very good throughout the whole process, right from the initial phone call that I had. There was an email address, telephone numbers, named people, which is very often important, particularly in people who've been in the job, you know, or in a new initiative to guide things through. And you could contact them immediately. And I think that came through as a support to somebody new to the experience, and maybe perhaps for a lot of the younger people that were there. The language I felt in the letter and in the feedback we've had since has been very welcoming and positive, and that doesn't always happen in new initiatives. You know, I felt that we were being invited, and we were being invited to participate. Yeah. We weren't being told, oh, this is an initiative, you know, and put your name down or don't, and then you think, oh, shall I, shan't I? It was very positive throughout, and I think it made me and others feel at ease in being able to come forward and volunteer for this. This is my first scrutiny meeting. I really thought I was coming in to sit and listen to what's going on today and take notes that at some point might be able to be fed back. So it's an experience I hadn't expected, but thank you all for the opportunity, and I'm sure David thinks the same. And as you can see, our last meeting was Saturday. We've already had feedback. We've already had the emails. We've already got points that we can take forward, or the opportunity to carry on. Even though for us this is probably the end of it, you know, you can see that it's not the end of it for the people who are running it. And that really does come through. And as I said, I think the staff are really, the staff particularly in the boroughs, are highly motivated with this and highly invested, I should say, in this initiative. So it should carry forward.
And I think just to pick up on Liz's last point as well, I think you can tell we're very keen and we're very motivated now from what we've been through. And the onus now is on us to carry on and see things, see some action. If we could maybe target some quick wins, so straight away you can see that things that we talked about, i.e. just a couple of extra bins somewhere or things, as soon as you see actions are happening, then even more so you'll be like, well, see, we talked about it, and the council have stepped in and they've done that. So we've proved that we can make a difference, we have to listen to, and actions will be taken because of it. So it's a perfect example of working together, and long may it continue.
That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing that. I think it really makes it real, and I certainly felt some of that when I went to the Assembly on Saturday. So thank you very much for the summary. So before I open the meeting to members' questions, and it may be that you have a further question to ask of the local partnerships or some of the process, I would remind members of our opportunity to make recommendations during the course of discussions, should you wish to do so, with officers and members of the public here present, or we can formulate them at the end of discussions, bearing in mind we have 2 reports today. So I'll open it up for any member questions. Okay, Councillor David Thomas, would you like to come in?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It all sounds very, very lovely, but let's look at the practical sides of this deal. Residents have clearly identified litter, parking enforcement, antisocial behaviour and street lighting as priorities. What specific operational changes will residents see in the next 12 months that differ from the current service delivery? Obviously, these are long-standing issues. So what evidence do we have that the deal will succeed where previous approaches have not?
Okay, I think the Chief Exec would like to come back on that.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Councillor Thomas. I mean, the next practical steps are, of course, to engage with communities at place. The deal can only be delivered at place. That's the important step. If you review across the 5 missions, Mission 5 in particular is one that I'll focus on here, which is around shared responsibility and shared power and shared ownership, really, of what happens within our places. That is a clear opportunity for us to establish local community groups, neighbourhood boards, work with local community councils, work with members in those areas, work with established groups within those areas, where they can help our services to set local priorities, as opposed to councils working in a more traditional way, which would, for example, include being on standardised rotas to operate in areas where we're not necessarily guaranteed to be hitting the priorities for that would be for local communities. So that's one of the things that you'll see as part of the mission development, and there's some of the major changes that you'll see in the way that we're working much more closely with our communities rather than doing much more doing with them.
Thank you very much.
Can I just come back on that, Chair, if that's okay? The Chief Executive talked about shared responsibility. So the report refers to devolved budget and shared responsibility. I just want to know, how do we ensure that this is perceived as empowerment rather than the council just stepping back from core responsibilities due to financial pressure? And I just want to see if we can clearly define which services will remain non-negotiable statutory responsibilities of the council under the deal.
Yeah, well, none of the council's statutory responsibilities are devolved to communities through the deal. What we're talking about here is looking at communities, understanding the inequalities that exist within our communities by looking at the evidence base that sits within the Marmot framework and working with our communities in order to establish better ways for us to deliver against those inequalities. So there's lots of discretionary things that the council can do. That we still have our statutory obligations, and in certain circumstances the council will always be obliged to fulfil those statutory obligations. However, There's clearly discretionary opportunities that councils have, and it's much more about empowerment with local communities to deliver against those discretionary items. So we can work much more closely with in terms of our parks, our cemeteries, our street scene, litter picking. We can work much more closely with communities in terms of managing the environment. So there's a range of areas that we can work much more closely with communities, and I don't think we should underestimate the role that they can play. It's very much about the council doing what it needs to do alongside those communities. There are certain things we wouldn't expect communities to do, certain aspects, heavy lifting, as I might describe it, where the council would have to do that, but we would work alongside communities so that the resource delivering against those improvements is expanded. This is something that the communities already do without the council. It's just ensuring that what we're doing is partnering with them in a much more effective way to deliver against those priorities that the communities set for themselves.
Thank you for that. Okay. Just to, as I say, this is an ongoing process, so I'll remind members that we will be monitoring this on a regular basis. I'll move now to, secondly, Councillor O'Connell.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So during Neil's brief there, one of the things he talked about was aims, goals or missions, I think, of the deal. And I apologise for not picking up specifically on which of those you referenced, but in that are a series of different, what I would call targets, effectively. And in there was descriptions around things like how do you, spirit, collaboration, pride, which are all good things to have. My question is, how do you measure those things? How do you know when you've achieved the target of the deal or the mission of the deal?
Okay, I think that was actually sort of about the monitoring sort of process and how you see the outcomes. So who's going to pick that one up? David Leach.
Hi, Councillor. There's a couple of different bits in there in terms of what we're referring to. So there's the broad Marmot framework, which sets out those long-term objectives. That's the lens that we look at things through. And there is a suite of indicators in development linked to that Marmot lens. Those are the things that will take time to change, but that will really make that step change in terms of the impact that we're making over time. We've then got the missions. And those 5 missions each have their own indicators that we'll be looking to track and develop. Some of the items that you referred to then relate to the principles that were suggested by the Citizens' Assembly. I think we've probably got some more work to do to work with the citizens to look at how we track and monitor impact on those. Some of that will be tangible, things that we can measure. Other parts won't be, and we won't be able to measure everything within that. It will just be what you see, feel and sense within your communities. So there will always be a balance for us between perceptions and that feeling that you get and hard data, quantifiable data. And we'll look to make sure we strike the right balance for those principles. We've certainly got that, I believe, in the missions and the Marmot.
The obvious question then is, how do you know if you've been successful?
So that's the logic model for us. So we know ultimately, over a period of time, if success has happened, when we start to see the dial shift on those Marmot indicators. We know in the medium term, if we're making that difference, when we start to see the dial shift on the missions and the indicators that sit within those missions. And in the short term, we know if we're making an impact based on the feeling that we get through from conversations, through the engagement that we do, but also the sort of annual indicators that we see in the service plan and in the county plan. So they all build up a layer that says if we do this now, then it should impact on this. That should change habits here, which mean that we should start to see the Marmot indicators moving. So it's multi-layered in terms of how we actually see that impact and when we see it.
Thank you for that. I think, bear this in mind for the second report today as well, and also the fact that the commitment has been given to go back to the Citizens' Assembly in a year. Neil, you want to come in briefly? I'm conscious I've got a few members waiting to come in, so
okay,
short.
Again, just quickly in response to Councillor O'Connell, we may have, this year is the next resident survey, which is now a national resident survey. There are questions in there. We try and influence the questions as best we can. But it usually asks questions around pride, around trust, around satisfaction. So hopefully there may be some things we can see the dial moving on. Through the sort of volunteering activity, We might be able to measure whether we see an increase in the number of volunteers or the number of volunteering hours, perhaps the number of groups who are listed on places like Connect or Vine, the number of volunteer events that are being listed. If those are some of the things that hopefully will point us to some success through the activity. And we might see an improved sentiment through social media channels, through our communications. So hopefully it will come through in various ways.
Okay, thank you for that. So I'll move on. I've got Councillor Ashley and then Councillor Haynes. So Councillor Ashley.
Yeah, I'm going to link a few things together. I was absolutely fascinated listening to the Citizen Assembly contributors to this. They are a new experience for them. I wanted to possibly ask them and our officers what experience they had of social engagement. Had they, not what the party political or anything like that, but had they engaged before? Some of the terminology is interesting. They came up with actions which some of us were very familiar with, and I suspect frustrated by. But bear in mind that a lot of us on this scrutiny have been involved in politics for quite a long time, as we see it. But they, as citizens, came up with similar things. And the use of the word citizens, and we use the word residents or constituents in our role, and the use of volunteer. And then I was going to go to the general thrust of things, social partnership, which I have used a lot personally over the years because I feel that's what we do with our communities. And I just want to throw one in there, which is community audit, because I think this group's done it rather well, actually. To get some views from the contributors, from the citizens and panel, and possibly from some officers on it, because I know Dave Leach to contribute to this quite well. I just want that interplay, because what I'm interested in is why people, we're in the political process, but why people possibly don't engage in that, but would engage in this. I'm fascinated by that, to be honest. I think there's some stuff that could be why people got involved in this and possibly didn't get involved in what we do.
Okay, I think the individuals are happy to say a little about why they got involved. And
certainly. Yeah. The reason for me was I've never really been very politically minded, so that's why I've not gone down that route. But for myself, as I said, it was an opportunity where, as a resident, I could get involved, maybe put across a few sort of bugbears that I've got, but it's a way of getting in, starting conversations. And I think the reason perhaps that we've come up with a number of ideas very similar to what council members may have come up with for many, many years is we had such a cross-section of people that not only did we sit in a group of 8 for the first Saturday, the next week we swapped round into other groups, and the week after we swapped round again. So you're always mixing with a different group of people discussing the topic. So various lived experiences could come across into the discussions, hence we were able perhaps to form the ideas that we did.
Great, thank you.
Sorry, and I'd like to add to that as well. Right from the onset, there was absolutely, as far as I was concerned, no discussion of long-term projects, whether it be roads, airports or whatever. That was totally not on the agenda. Everything was focused, and it was what we probably call small task initiatives. Mm-hmm. Most of them, or a lot of them, if you had these booklets like Torvain Talks, which are produced, and there's another new one out called Nifty Thrifty, which came out in January, and that is showing ongoing things now, and is actually starting to show the sort of things we brought up in communication. Now, the other thing that I was totally unaware of, I have no idea of anybody I spoke with in that group of 40, what their party politics are. There was no focus at all. We focused on the tasks in hand. Most of the tasks were up and running because this is where we had our exemplar work from. We had the videos, we had people from different groups, people who've been involved in volunteering or in groups over many years. And it's true, if you've been living in Torvain for a long time, you perhaps don't see that there's been much move forward. But has it been has it had this focus before? I don't know that it has. We've relied on the council to do it more often than not. Been easy to criticise and complain and have a moan and groan. As David said, he feels more valued now, and I think so do I, that we can actually, hopefully, play some small part in this. Yeah. And the gentleman's point is, Ashley Stewart. As you were making your point, two things I picked up immediately on this, in this group. We had a video from a Glenavon group that had been focusing on breastfeeding. And the thing that surprised me from that is that we were told this has come from the health service. This initiative has not come from people in the area. It came because there were some problems. They wanted to address support for the young mums, and in a variety of initiatives. And basically, it was identified to Blaen y Gwent, so maybe they didn't know before that, I presume they wouldn't, that they had a very low rate of mums breastfeeding. And they didn't just say, oh, right, we'll try and do something about this. They said, well, let's find out what's caused the problem. And when they gave the feedback to us, it was things like, or some of the points were, oh, well, my mother didn't, none of my friends do, my grandmother didn't, and it's really become out of fashion, as much as other contributing factors. But, I mean, it's a small area, but a very important group of people who are going to be mums and grandmums in the future. And when you see country initiatives, or the whole country, and every authority, I presume now, can produce figures for all these different groups, and I'm only mentioning this one because it's the one we were shown. And I can't remember what the starting figure was, but the percentage that are now breastfeeding, I believe, is about 65 or 67%. And it's come from, I think, a single-digit number. I mean, it was day one. It was one of the first videos I saw, so I didn't note the actual percentages. But it was huge. It really was huge. And that's one small community. But the other thing that's come out of that, and I think it will do when you look at early years learning, these mums now, and our children of the future, they don't just, and as a couple of the men said, oh, I felt a bit awful when it came up, you know, women breastfeeding. I didn't know what that had to do with the Citizens' Assembly. But the thing that's come out of that now, not only have they got a friendship group, and it's not just a friendship group, it's an important medical support group, because it's come through the health service. It's been identified there. Not somebody who's come in and said, oh, you know, I think we should address our bin problem or something like that. And if we can use bodies of information like the health service, businesses and other groups, and use the interactions that can be, and you know, contributions that can be forged there, these parents now, I don't know how it is today, because we were just given the video. But we were told they've now got a support group. Those children will be then going into nursery within the next year or two, possibly, or, you know, at home with parents. There's initiatives now that these people have become friends. They're going to grow up together. They're going to know each other in 5 or 10 years' time, whereas if we've moved into an area and we've been a bit of an outsider and we don't have this networking, they've got a ready network group that I think will probably develop for a lot of them into a long-term friendship group. It's a bit like when you're in a school. You're all in the same boat, you know, everybody shares the same experiences, and lots of good things come out of it. And one other little point, if I've got time there, you said about monitoring. And this came as well from a leaflet. I think I had a leaflet, or it might have been in Torfaen Talks a few months ago, about trying to improve the amount of food waste that people are putting out. Apparently it's been dropped. Torfaen seems to be doing really well in recycling, really, really well, country-wise. They gave us a figure and said, you know, and it said to me, or it suggested to me, if we can get the food waste percentage up, then we could be the top of the tree. Now, to me, that's far more motivating. And if people know, if they know that, well, if we can just put more food waste out instead of putting it wherever some people are obviously putting it, then there's going to be an improvement, and that will affect the whole borough. And to me, it was a little point, but I thought, gosh, if people read that and just take it on board, knowing that we're already near the top. Yeah. I don't know if I'm right in saying this. I might have remembered some of the facts not correctly, but you can see you're nearly there. And a little bit more effort, a bit more, that's right. And then suddenly on the local news, it'll be, oh, Torvine, they're the top of in recycling. I mean, that's a huge motivation because we're all, involved in recycling. Sorry about the time, but it was something I thought of when the speaker spoke.
No, thank you. I think that really illustrates very well the response there. So, as I say, conscious of a few more questions. Councillor Haynes.
Thank you, Chair. I've got, I think, 4 questions. Shall I do them one at a time so to not confuse?
Yes, if you could, please.
Okay. In the report, Neil mentioned about 299 completed surveys, and I'm interested to find out how did engagement levels differ between more and less deprived areas, and how will future engagement ensure inclusion of underrepresented groups?
Okay. I think, well, do you want to use second question, do 2, and then I know Neil's ready to respond. So do you want to use second question, Councillor Haynes?
And this is very much for one of the Assembly members, so he gets an answer, although I had written it down earlier. What immediate visible actions can residents expect in response to what residents most want fixed?
I think that's very clear. So, I don't know, Neil, you're going to respond to the first one?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Haynes. In the executive summary, there is a breakdown of where surveys were completed from. That won't necessarily tell us whether those people who completed the survey were from underrepresented groups, but we certainly reached out to those underrepresented groups throughout our engagement process, trying to reach some of those forums, whether it's the Disability Forum, whether it's the Older People's Forum, whether it's the Young People's Forum. We try to reach out multiple different ways to different groups. We also spoke to lots of partners who then would engage with their tenants, for example. So we engage with Bronavon, who then may engage with their tenants. So I can't exactly tell you whether underrepresented groups, how many of them completed surveys, but it was a good broad representation from right across the borough, all areas of the borough.
Okay, and I think the second question you were asking about sort of tangible benefits, and I think our citizen reps are happy to speak.
Yeah, I think obviously what came out of our sessions was that there are 3 main things. Obviously, the obvious one, street lighting, dog mess and potholes. But to pick another example where as residents we could see a quick win, and again that gives you the feedback and the encouragement that things are being done. When we talk about litter bins, and there are certain areas where there's not that many bins, one of the suggestions we came up with was just like putting a little sort of barcode or something on the bins, which could easily, you just scan it and basically says this bin needs to be emptied more regular. Something like that, figures could be collated very quickly. And then in a couple of weeks' time, when you see a new bin, straight away, well, the council have acted on that. Straight away, it's shown that we've spoken and council have listened and we've achieved something. Another quick win. And so that would be an example of something that could be done very quickly and shows that we're being listened to and actions are being taken.
Thank you. That's a clear illustration. I think David Leach would like to come in. I know you've got another couple of questions, Councillor Haynes.
Just to come in very quickly on that point, it's a brilliant example because I've already seen emails bouncing backwards and forwards this week since the Assembly about how quickly can we do that, can we start to put it on some, so I would hope that that becomes a very quick win. We're just waiting for the feedback from officers now on how quickly they can.
Okay, Councillor Haynes, I know you had a couple more points.
Yeah, thank you for that. How are key partners embedding the deal into their own delivery plans, and what commitments have partners formally made?
And if you'd like to do your fourth question as well.
Okay. What is the greatest reputational risk if delivery does not match engagement ambition, and how will expectations be managed publicly?
Great questions. I think David Leach would like to come back.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, it's a great question around partners embedding into delivery plans. So members of the Assembly would have heard some of the commitments from Halo, from our leisure provider, around programmes that they're running that now form part of their delivery plans. Those include upcoming activities, leisure activities for groups with dementia, as well as activities for children with learning difficulties and with neurodiversity as well. So there are programmes that they are already developing and building into their service plans as a result of the conversations on the deal. Moving swiftly on to the housing associations, there is a commitment through our local level working groups with the chief execs of the housing associations to start to build deal-based activities in, and also to look at the structures that they operate to. So can they operate more effectively with communities at place through things like the way that housing officers are deployed? We've asked in that meeting, it's called the ASPB, we've asked them to bring in within the next month their service plans for the year ahead to give us that reassurance that you're seeking there, that this is now being built into service planning. So when we do receive those, we can give a further update on that, and we'll be assuring and testing that through those sessions. And finally, the health boards. Again, in a similar setting, as a joint executive team, we've been very firm with the health board around the role that we see the community playing and the role of community activity within the health space as well. We've already seen the health board starting to look at joint programmes with us. There's a brilliant example being developed in Crosskeeliog and Lanarafon with ourselves and the Community Council at the minute about a pathway in the community around sport and leisure that will look to directly reduce down the number of people presenting at the GP's surgeries, with the surgeries on board from the local area on that example as well. So we're starting to see the commitments. I think we're in service planning mode at the minute as our partners. I would hope within the next 2 months we'll have that on paper in a much firmer way from partners. But I've got no concerns that they're not taking this seriously and aren't as committed as us to making changes across the system.
Thank you for that information.
In terms of the question around delivery risk, I think it's the conversation that we touched on earlier around the expectations that this does raise, and that is a risk that we need to manage. Around, are we going to be able to reshape our services quickly enough, the part that the council needs to do, and the role that we play within that? And are we going to be able to get groups of community members together quickly enough to look at those prioritisations, to look at each local place, how do we direct the resource into the priorities that the communities are telling us, and how do we build that pool of resources together then with the community that comes together? So you're right, that is the biggest risk that we're looking to manage. What we're doing to manage that is we're really pushing at the minute with Torfaen Voluntary Alliance the role of volunteering beyond the sort of more formal structured roles. So what I would call more civic engagement, civic activity. And actually, coincidentally, there's a meeting of all of the community groups involved in Pontypool this evening on exactly that. How can they work together to work with us on some of those activities at place, where at the minute they may be operating as individual groups, all facing the same challenges. So we've got TVA attending along with council officers, along with those groups, to say how do we work better together. So I'm confident the plans are in place to mitigate those risks as well, and we will keep an eye on that through our risk monitoring framework.
Okay, thank you. And you'll be pleased to hear this is now my last question, or at the moment it's my last question. We've got a critical friend in Powys County Council, and what role will that identified critical friend play in independent challenge?
Stephen would like to come back on that.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Councillor Haynes. Initially, of course, we've approached Powys. They've looked at our plans, our initial plans around the deal. The next phase is around them scrutinising and playing critical friend around different aspects of our delivery of the deal, including our communications and engagement approach, and how we continue to develop that further, how we keep the Citizens' Assembly, etc. engaged. So that will be the next focus. And as the deal evolves further, we'll be asking them at various stages throughout the coming years for us to continue to support us, test our thinking, kick the tyres, I suppose, on what it is that we're doing, how well we're working, to scrutinise our effectiveness and to challenge us in all the ways that a critical friend would be expected to do. But they'll focus upon really whatever stage we're at within the delivery of the deal, whether it be in the early stages of setting that up, whether it be in the communications engagement, or whether it be going on the ongoing delivery.
Thank you for that. Hope that helps. Councillor Haynes? Good. Okay, I'm conscious there's still more members rightly wanting to come in, so I'll call Councillor Seaborn.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say how good it was to hear David and Liz, you know, at the front end of the consultation process. Their feedback is really useful. My question is about, obviously we're looking at the key messages, and that's improvements for everyone. Did we link the views of our residents with the areas within the borough? My example is town centre rundown. Well, that might mean differently in Blanavon, Pontypool and Cwmbran. And loneliness. Is this specific areas? And I can take poverty as well. So are we looking at a universal service, north, mid, south, ward level, smaller sections of the community? And how are we going to work with all that?
Yep, I think that's clear. I think Neil is happy to respond initially.
Thanks, Councillor Seaborn. In the executive summary, it doesn't break it down, those specific issues by area, but behind, we probably have got the data to be able to do that, to look a bit deeper to where specific issues may have been referenced. I suspect we'll be able to see perhaps some of the town centre references be into specific areas. So I'm sure we can do a deeper delve into the surveys, but I'd have to ask the officer to look into very specific issues to be able to tell us exactly where some of that commentary has come from.
Okay, but I think when we're looking at recommendations, colleagues, these may be the sorts of things we'd like to highlight. Okay. Councillor Nick Haller, and then I have Councillor Janet Jones. Nick, Councillor Haller.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, everybody. First of all, I'd like to say the deal rocks my boat. I really like the way that we are moving forward within the council. However, there are three key points to me that really, really matter to make this successful, and I'll say them: engagement, participation, and volunteering. Engagement. We've seen not many people come back on that survey against the proportion of people that live in Torvine, and my worry is that we've got to get the whole engagement of the whole community behind this to make this successful. Participation. We get a few people within our borough that like to participate in things, but a lot of people within our borough like to think that it should be their right to have it for them. It's not for them to not to do, but to have things done for them. And volunteering. If I've had many conversations with David Leach about volunteering, there are elements in the north of the borough, especially, that there are limited volunteers for lots of volunteering positions. And my concern is, if we want to get this deal to work, we've got to get more volunteering going on in communities. How can we do that? So how can we achieve this for the whole community, for the whole communities to embrace the deal for the long-term benefit that I believe that we will have? But right now, I do see it's only a small amount of people that are engaging, are participating, and they're volunteering, and we're not actually engaging with the whole community. Am I wrong to say that?
Okay, I think I think some fair observations. I think we've had a good outline of the engagement process, and obviously it's quite a specific piece with the citizens' assemblies. And I guess, but people may want to come in on that. I'll give you that opportunity, but David Leach would like to open up.
I'll be really quick on this one. I think you've hit the nail on the head in terms of the three pathways into civic engagement that we have. That first one is around how do we tap into those people who want to tell us what's going on, which I know was reflected in the survey. Tell us what's going on, petition, get involved, but maybe not get involved on the ground. Participation then is about that more getting involved on the ground. And then volunteering, if you really focus it in on a structured volunteering programme, is that more structured activity. I think when we reflect on the conversations that we've had, Councillor, in the past around Blaenavon, I and the team may have blended participation and volunteering a little bit, because what we're looking for a lot of the time with some of the litter picking activity or the planting of a planter doesn't need to be structured volunteering. That's active citizen participation. So certainly we're reflecting at the minute, and this may well come up in your conversations as a committee, but certainly we're reflecting on how we more clearly draw the line between how you can just get involved in the life of your community as opposed to what's a more formal, structured volunteering opportunity, where inevitably the pool of people involved in that will be smaller than the pool of people involved in participation. So we've got a lot, I think, to reflect on from our discussions in the past, and we are doing so in our volunteering approach.
Okay, I think Neil would like to add a bit as well.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Horler. I probably would say the deal is evolution, not revolution, and I know Stephen would probably like it to be revolution. But we know that overnight this is going to take time for people to realise that active participation has results. So on the engagement perspective, we would always want more. We had a window of opportunity before Christmas. I think we had it open for several weeks, but people have continued to complete that survey since, because we haven't shut it. We don't want it to shut it down, that discussion, so we would always encourage more people to give us their views and would always want more. Participation, I think we can encourage through demonstrating the art of the possible. We've got some fantastic groups that are participating in the borough and making a real difference to the communities they live in. If we can do more to show what is possible, I think we'll get more people wishing to be active citizens, because they'll see there's a benefit. And volunteering, we've mentioned one of our priorities for next year, one of our priority campaigns will be on the deal, so demonstrating the achievements, the actions of the deal, but also working with partners, community councils, working with Torfaen Voluntary Alliance to increase the knowledge about how to volunteer. Citizens' Assembly members told us that there's a little bit of anxiety about how to, where to go, what information, and sometimes how much people can give. Sometimes they think perhaps if I can give an hour, that won't be enough. But actually, if we could get 20,000 people to give an hour somewhere in the borough, it'll have a big impact. So doing more, and I think we'd call that small asks. We'll start off small. If you ask volunteers to undertake a big, arduous task, you're unlikely to find a volunteer. You've got to start small, encouraging people to do the small thing, which hopefully will then lead to a habit of giving.
Thank you for that. Did you want to say anything?
Can I come back on Neil, please?
I think David would like to say something.
Sorry, I was just going to pick up on that point. I think I would liken it to a snowball pushing it down a hill, and exactly that. Once you start the process and you start engaging people, so as you're pushing it further and further, more people can see what's happening, more people will get involved and join in, and then by the time it gets to the bottom of the hill, you've got a massive snowball. So it's as simple as that. It's getting the engagement up front. I appreciate that, but the more that people can see what's going on, see results, they will want to get involved. More people will join in, we'll get more participation, which leads to more people volunteering. And possibly, people volunteer and they don't even know that they're doing it. People are already engaged in activities and maybe they don't even consider as volunteering. I've run a five-a-side football group for 30 years, so I guess I'm actually a volunteer, but I just see it as having a kick about with a bunch of mates on a Monday night. But these things are happening, and they're happening right now, and it's getting the message out there that this is available if people want to join in. And two, it's pushing it forward. So I can only see it as a positive step.
Yeah, no, I think that's very helpful. Did you want to say anything further, Councillor Horler?
Yes,
Mike?
please, yeah. Just to go back to Neil's comment, participation, talking about what people do. In the last few months, I've seen about taking on children, volunteering to look after children through orphanages, not orphanages, but adoption services. It's really rocked my boat. I'm not at that age where I want children around me at that age, you know, being in my mid-60s. But I've seen that, and I've seen the smiling faces that have come out of those kind of posts. Is there a chance to get more participation, key points pushed out into the communities to let them know that there is pleasure, like David has just said, and volunteering? There's a situation right now, you're right, that people are tied down to hours of the day when they can and when they can't. And I think it's making volunteering an easier thing to do in some format, which would be, to me, would be more beneficial.
Yeah, I think that's noted, and I think, you know, I'm mindful of time a little. Certainly, these are helpful points, I think, as we shape the way the deal goes forward. The fact that volunteering has to be flexible to be able to meet the different needs. So again, bear that in mind for your recommendations, colleagues. I'll move on to Councillor Janet Jones, and then I have Councillor Stuart Ashley after that. Janet, Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. Most of my questions I had have ticked off because they've been asked by previous members. Do we feel that any groups have been missed out during these consultations? I mean, our older people, many who don't have access or don't get involved in social media or tech and laptops and computers, etc. Do we feel that we've missed out any groups that we should be getting involved with, especially those living in poverty and deprived areas who really feel a bit left out and let down? So how are we trying to work harder to get involved with these groups, please?
Okay, I think that's an engagement question, and obviously we've gone through a bit of the engagement process and the process of the citizen panels. But Neil, would you like to add anything further briefly?
Yes, Councillor Jones. I am just looking in the executive summary of the survey to see if the question age was actually asked. I'm not sure if the question age was something we asked of respondents. I'll have to double check that to know whether we had representation from older people. But we certainly went and spoke to all different groups, and we went to different venues, and we also went on road shows where there was perhaps where maybe older people are still shopping as opposed to younger people shopping online. And our makeup of our Citizens' Assembly, we wanted the broad spectrum. I would probably say fairly that it was slightly older, but then that would have been through the people who responded, the people who expressed an interest. But we did put some weight on ensuring in that assembly that we had extra emphasis on young people, because to make sure that we had even more balance. And we had quite a few younger people, probably not as many as we would have liked. But we tried to get that balance in everything we do to make sure we are speaking to the broadest section of our community.
I hope that helps, Councillor Jones.
Yes, I'll just keep encouraging people to try and answer or respond, or if they have any queries, to put it in the right direction. So thanks very much, both.
Thank you. Okay, just remind members that we do have another report to consider after this, so can I ask that questions are quite brisk and to the point? I'll bring in Councillor Ashley next.
Yeah, a couple of questions. In previous manifestation, when I was committee chair of this committee, I also chaired the local PSB. I'm wondering whether we need to reinvent that with a slightly different brief, because I'm looking at partner engagement, and maybe we need to go back to local partner engagement with maybe a bit added. That's one question. The other is about Dave's favourite subject, Dave Leach's favourite subject, capacity building and local resources, because the implication of citizens' engagement and what we're looking at with the deal is we need local capacity building and partnership engagement. It's got delivery with it, and I unfortunately, when we get to the end of our limit, Dave, you always hear me on about this one, but it does need it. It needs capacity builders and the partner organisations with similar people working together to deliver the wish of the citizen. I'll leave it there, shall I?
Thank you for that. Yeah, I think David Leach is happy to respond in a brief way.
Can do so very quickly. Completely agree in terms of capacity building. Reflecting on their importance, that's why we've built them into the structure. These aren't wishy-washy roles. These are roles that have a very, very specific part as part of a prevention infrastructure, and we need to make sure that we've got the right performance frameworks that sit behind that as well, which are in development as we speak. On that broader point to do with the local group of the PSB, the ISPB is fulfilling a lot of those functions in this space at the minute. I'd be cautious of setting up too many groups, particularly where there's duplication across what activity is taking place. I'm quite happy to do a members' seminar if it would help on the role of the ISPB, what it covers, how its agendas work and who attends, just to hopefully give members that reassurance that partnership work is taking place.
Chair, just briefly coming back, what the Citizens' Assembly flags up issues that I, as a community councillor, have flagged up for years, including, I love that one about putting labels on bins, because that's something I've suggested for the last, as you well know, Chair, for the last 5 or 6 years. Putting labels or section on bins is one of my favourite subjects, but now I am... It's brilliant that the Citizens' Assembly have come up with exactly the same idea. When are they going to do it?
Okay, I think the point has been noted and really solidly in place. So thank you for that. I'll move on. I know Councillor David Thomas, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I want to see if I can get officers to explain this in simple terms, how the deal is a transformational and reset relationship with residents, because there are no financial implications. The mandate remains within existing structures, and the next steps focus largely on communication and engagement activities. So I want to know what tangible structure or service level changes demonstrate that this is more than a cultural rebranding exercise. I need to understand what specific decision-making powers, budget controls or service delivery mechanisms will be different under the deal compared to how the council operates today.
Okay, I think that's, from what I'm hearing so far, it's something that's still emerging, but I think the Chief Exec would like to come back on that.
Yeah, I think it's not a rebranding of what we do, but it is there's undoubtedly it's a cultural shift in the way that we work. Every department in the council, particularly at the front line of our services, will be expected to work differently with our communities. I've given the example of our street scene, our cemeteries teams, our parks teams as one example, but that'll cut across all of our culture and leisure services too. The council is in a position where it acts in a way that it largely delivers to its communities. And the big shift in the way that we work, and if I use sports development as an example, because every department will have to look at the way that they deliver services through the same lens, but sports development right now may well run, for example, groups where they'll put on a 12-week programme where we are standing at the front of a group of citizens delivering a programme of health improvement to them. The shift there will be, whilst we may do that in one form or another, the focus will shift very much into saying it's not just about delivering a class, it is very much about building a resilient community of those people that come together so that they then become leaders of their own groups and carry on with that well-being objective. And that you can apply that principle to all of the services that we deliver. The councils currently, we're no different to many others in this space, we tend to do to our communities. We put officers in front of them, as long as we've got the money to pay for officers, and we deliver services to them. This is a completely different relationship in the way that we engage, the way that we work with, and what we expect in terms of an outcome with all of those communities. And that would apply to every department at the front line of the council. The ambition here, of course, is in the long term. What we would expect to see is a healthier, more equal community of people out there, meaning that fewer people turn up at social care's front door. Social care is where the council spends most of its money, and that bubble continues to grow, and it will continue to grow whilst there are inequalities across our communities of the nature that we're describing. And just to give an example of that, as to the deterioration across our communities, the average healthy life expectancy for a woman in Torvine is 53 years of age. That means that some women in their late 40s are turning up at social care's front door. They may well be receiving our services for decades, when actually what they should be doing is living much healthier lives until they're much older, and then, of course, it may well be that they need social care services. So if we can make that cultural shift across our communities, then we may well be able to see disinvestment in that part of our service for reinvestment in the early intervention and prevention services. The only one thing, a bit of a myth bust, I suppose, around the deal isn't just about more volunteers or more people doing volunteering. It is about trying to help people to live healthier lives across communities, and really looking at ways that people can age well across our communities. And they're the kind of areas that we'll be focusing alongside some of the activities.
Yeah, Chair, if I could just come back a sec. I understand all of that, and that's fine. That is fine. But what I don't understand, and what I'm pretty sure the public are not going to understand, is what specific, and this is what I'm looking for, specific decision-making powers and budget controls of service delivery mechanisms will be different under the deal compared to how this council runs today.
Well, I've given you one example, Councillor Thomas, in respect of, say, for example, the way that local communities decide on the local priorities. That will be in the way that we deploy our resources across a range of areas. Some of that will be the way that we deploy our staff. Some of it may well be in the way that we spend our money. But of course, it's very difficult to give you the specific examples because we've not yet engaged with those local communities for them to determine that. But that will be the next step, and that will be the significant shift that you're describing there.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that, Councillor Thomas. Thank you for that, Chief Executive. I've got the last question from Councillor Seaborn. I think we will make this the last question, and then we can consider recommendations. So, Councillor Seaborn.
Yeah, mine is obviously about communication, and we've done a wonderful job with communicating with our publics and our assembly so far. But the most important part of communication, I find, is feedback. And we've just managed to get it right with, or nearly right with, the work that James Vale has been doing for members. But I do feel that residents need a better and improved feedback system, because sometimes they report things and they don't hear anything, what's happening or when it's going to happen or whether it's been completed. So I hope we're going to work on some feedback to our residents.
I think that's very true, and I think that was where the importance, I think, of having a citizens' assembly already set in advance to know and ask and question and see is really important. But Neil, would you like to respond briefly on that, or?
Yeah, we often refer to "you said, we did" as a good way, a good vehicle of giving that feedback. We've got to continue to do more of that. I think the leader also gave a really firm commitment at the top of the meeting to re-engage the Citizens' Assembly members in a year's time to give a progress report. But we'll be using all our channels. The deal is very much at the forefront of our communication, and we'll be using all our channels to demonstrate the difference the deal is making and examples of the deal, and how people can get involved in the deal over the next 12 months and beyond.
Okay, thank you for that. I should perhaps just check if the leader has got any very brief comments they want to make. I know he's been able to join us.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and I'd like to particularly thank David and Liz for their feedback. I think that phrase of critical friends is a really appropriate one in this respect. People who care about their communities, who want to be a part of making a difference, who get what we're trying to do, but who don't necessarily always just agree with how we'll do it, and we'll push back when we don't do things in the right way. I think that's really useful. Some points particularly, I think David's point about five-a-side football is a really compelling one for me. Lots of residents in our communities will do lots of things that they don't necessarily think of as volunteering. The example of the five-a-side football evenings. So this isn't all about new things, but for example, with that group, if someone's got a sports group and a bunch of people they meet up with once a week, how can we plug into that group so that we can use that to sort of distribute information about support and an opportunity, so that group can become not just a five-a-side football group, but a sort of a means of making sure we keep a check on each other and build community. There's no end of examples like that around the borough. In some of the projects I've been involved in, the main benefits haven't been the primary purpose of the group. For example, local parks friends group I'm involved in. The biggest benefit actually has been the knock-on impacts. So yes, the park looks better, but the community's closer together. When the volunteers are maybe one of them was unwell recently, the rest of the group got around them and supported them, and that has big advantages both for people and for public services. So I think there's loads of things that can be gained from that, and just thank you to David and Liz for coming along today and for their participation. Having those sort of critical friends, having people who will sort of cast an eye and give an external view on what you're doing, from a point of view of external not being the council but internal being part of a community is really important.
Thank you very much. Okay, can I thank the leader and the officers and the invitees for your contributions. Members, we're now asked to consider the scrutiny activity and any potential recommendations. To remind you, the appendices, the recommendations were firstly to determine whether we're satisfied that the communications and engagement strategy for the Council's deal with the community has been robust and effective and can build trust and foster shared responsibility, as well as empower communities to co-design and co-deliver services. So you may well have some thoughts and recommendations there. Secondly, to establish whether the proposed next steps will deliver on what communities have been telling us through this engagement process. And finally, making recommendations setting out any suggestions for further stakeholder engagement or areas for review or greater focus. Members, would you like to highlight any points now while we still have officers present, or are you content to bring those up when we go to the end of the second report? I think I'll take the executive decision here and say I think we'll take the recommendations all together at the end, which means that those who are not involved in the second report can leave if they wish. Sorry, Councillor Haynes.
Sorry, Chair. I'm just mindful that we've got literally half an hour left to do quite a big second item on the agenda, and we've yet to formalise our recommendations. I'm just concerned that the agenda's a bit overpacked. So if you don't mind, can we do the recommendations now for what we've just been discussing, so that if we run out of time, all members agree to extend the meeting so that we are here to properly scrutinise the county plan, being the other option.
Okay, that's a proposal that's been made. I don't see any objections, so I suggest we go forward then. Okay, so would anybody like to start in terms of key recommendations to make? Please bear in mind we are in camera and members, officers and citizens are still present. Councillor Williams in the chamber.
Yes, if I can perhaps make a start with suggestions for recommendations. Just listening to all the comments up to now, perhaps a possible recommendation would be that there's a continuation to consolidate the work of the citizens panel, ensuring that decision making is embedded in their activity, because I think that's quite an important thing. And that part of that role is to ensure that the work of collaboration with the different forums and community groups is heard, and that the small but important inputs are captured and kept. Thank you.
Sorry, made a note of that. Thank you. Any other members want to come in? I see hands. So, Councillor Seaborn and then Councillor Haynes. Councillor Seaborn.
Thank you, Chair. I think there's a recommendation to have some of that sub-ward information from the questionnaires so that we can see if there's any specific issues in particular areas, if that's possible. And the other one would be on feedback, you know, a proper process for feeding back to our residents.
Okay, and I think we want to understand what that feedback process is. So we made a note of that. Thank you very much, Councillor Seaborn. So,
thank you.
Councillor Haynes, apologies.
Yeah, I've got a few. To formalise its engagement with the identified critical friend from Powys County Council to ensure consistent and constructive independent challenge. Specifically, Torfaen Council should adopt a clear engagement matrix and define timescales for involving this critical friend, rather than relying solely on ad hoc involvement at the discretion of officers, staff, etc. The structured approach would strengthen transparency, accountability and the robustness of decision-making processes. That was off the back of my question about the critical friend. I've quickly written that down. Yep. The next one is to demonstrate early visible wins, identify and communicate a small number of tangible, visible improvements to build credibility and public confidence.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, I think that's nice and clear. Yep.
Strengthen targeted engagement in areas of greatest inequality. Basically, that future engagement activities prioritise residents in the most deprived areas and of those experiencing the greatest health risks, because this reflects our Marmite principles.
Yep, I think that's clear as well. Thank you very much.
Measurable success indicators. Please tell me if I'm talking too fast. That specific 12 months, 3-year or 5-year outcome measures be agreed for the deal.
Yep. What I can tell you, Councillor Haynes, is people are desperately scribbling things down, so they are being
Okay,
noted.
I will slow down. Yeah, I'll wait. Just tell me when I can go on to the last two.
Carry on.
Okay, and then provide demographic and geographic participation analysis. That scrutiny be provided with a detailed breakdown of survey and citizen assembly participation compared to borough demographics and deprivation data to assess representation.
Thank you.
And my last one is my last one relates to my question about our key partners, that we should somehow formalise partner commitment, that they clearly articulate how the deal principles will embed within their organisational plans. That's pretty much it.
Okay, thank you for that. Obviously, there's a limit to what we can put there, but I think seeing the service plans and the points that David Leach highlighted are going to be critical there. Right, I'll go on to next is Councillor Ashley and then Councillor Horler.
Well, I like to agree with Liz Haynes on regards to the partnership. When I did mention the mini PSB, I'd like to see, agree with her on the last point that we need some sort of arrangement where everybody can get together, whether you call it PSB or call it something else, just to formalise that, because at the moment I think that arrangement's unsatisfactory. So the other thing that I raised was the capacity builders and resources, and that needs to be there. and possibly part of a regular budget, not something that we get and we lose the experience. I've been on about that for a few years, to be quite frank. There's something similar to Liz Haynes's thing, which I probably Garrett will merge in, which is the ability to the bit where we come up with something, they've come up with something, and that information needs to be shared across the piece, and probably the Community Council, various other people, because that shared policy questions or service questions just needs to be shared. Also, this is something that might be a bit unusual. I'm not sure how we achieve it, but it's worth throwing it in there. The contribution of the Citizens Assembly people was so good this afternoon. I'm wondering whether they could be invited in appropriate bits to be on scrutiny, because I think they'd be brilliant.
Okay, I'll stop you there. I think that's some useful suggestions. I think Rebecca would like to...
Thank you, Chair. If I could just come in quickly there. Sorry, Councillor Ashley. So a couple of the points you've made there, we have noted them all down. But just to reference, obviously, Dave did answer some of those queries you had about the PSB with regards to the newly established IFPB, and he did offer perhaps a seminar. So perhaps if we note those as comments rather than formal recommendations,
yes, please.
We'll get those covered off. Thank you.
But the resource question, I think, is one that needs to be put there as a concrete suggestion.
Okay, I think what I would suggest is we have noted that. I think that was also noted in terms of the budget scrutiny, and I'm sure it will be something that we mentioned in relation to the next item. Right, next to come in, Councillor Haller.
Thank you. Just going back on the question I asked earlier, could we have more comms with positive stories talking about participating and volunteering? And I'm sure that would help the engagement process, moving it forward as this process goes on.
Good suggestion.
Some positive stories out there about what people are doing, why they're volunteering, why people are participating.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
Yep, I think that's a recommendation that we actually would want to see more case studies as they emerge and examples of good practice in action. So we note that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Move on to Councillor Janet Jones, and I know I'm conscious members will need to leave. So, Councillor Jones.
I'm not sure it's a recommendation or as much as an observation. We need to be informed how the impact of the deal is having on volunteers. Is there going to be an increase or a decrease in volunteers working through together with TVA?
Okay, I think that's a suggested measure which I think we need to take account of. So thank you very much for that, Councillor Jones. I think Councillor David Thomas wanted to come in.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'm going to have to go after this. I'd like to recommend that the Cabinet returns within 3 months with a fully costed, time-bound implementation plan for the deal, so we can clearly see what is changing, who is accountable, and how success is being measured.
So his recommendation is to actually have a plan from Cabinet that's time-based, costed, etc. Yep. Thank you. We've made a note of that. Sorry? Apologies. I think that's all the questions. Thank you, colleagues. We'll pull those together with some rapidity because we're conscious that some of these points will need to go forward to Cabinet. If you'll indulge us slightly, colleagues, because I think a couple of members who are present would want to leave prior to the next report, though you are welcome to stay, David and Elizabeth, if you wish. And I'll introduce the county plan, which is item 5, Delivery Plan 26-27. So this report presents to members an update on the development of the Council's county plan. I'll just break briefly to say thank you very much to our citizens who are leaving for their contribution. I'm sure we have found that extremely valuable, David and Liz, so thank you very much again. So I'll welcome the officers who have joined us for this report and the executive member for corporate governance and resources. And I'll hand over to, is Councillor Jones with us online? No? Okay, so I think then it's to Stephen Vickers to introduce the report. So over to you, unless there's, or are you going to be taking some of the points as well?
I can do that, Chair, for me. Okay. So thank you, Chair. So the report presents the Council's draft delivery plan for 26-27, setting out the key activities, milestones and performance measures we aim to deliver over the coming year in support of the ambitions within that county plan. County plan, which has been in place since 2022, guides our work on the major challenges we face, including supporting families, improving education and skills, tackling inequality and responding to the climate and nature emergency. The delivery plan translates these long-term ambitions into clear, practical actions for the year ahead. The plan highlights the main projects and activities we will prioritise within the next year and aligns closely to the budget that was scrutinised by this committee a couple of weeks ago. Together, these actions represent our key areas of focus for improving wellbeing beyond the delivery of our day-to-day services. This year's plan is particularly significant because it begins to demonstrate how the Council will work differently through the Torfaen deal, which members have obviously already heard about earlier today. The deal is that new social contract between our communities, residents and partners, shifting us from the doing to people towards doing with them, with a strong emphasis on the prevention, fairness, shared responsibility and community strength. Deal is not separate from the county plan, rather it is becoming the way in which we deliver against its ambitions. The county plan sets out what we want to achieve, while the deliver shapes how we'll work by aligning our culture, systems and service models with our wellbeing objectives. The 26-27 delivery plan is the first to reflect the deal and its missions within service plans, while the overall format remains unchanged, as this is the final year of our current county plan. Each wellbeing objective now includes an introduction explaining how the deal will influence our approach in the future. So members are asked to consider the plan, provide comments and make recommendations before it's presented to Council for final approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Okay, so I'll open that up to members to highlight any questions that they may wish to raise. Okay, Councillor Haynes, number one.
Oops, okay. I've got a few. You describe this plan as focusing on big ticket deliverables. What criteria are used to decide what qualifies as big ticket?
Yeah, in general terms, Councillor, what we're referring to is the transformational work rather than the day-to-day activity of council teams as part of their everyday duties.
Okay, thank you. Do you just want me to carry on with my questions, Chair?
Yeah, could you ask, as I say, if you've got several questions, I think two, as we did before, is fine to give people an opportunity to reflect and to respond. Thank you.
Okay, so if in your financial pressures arise, how will decisions be made about which commitments are protected and which may slip? And the second one then is, you referred to robust project management. Can you explain what happens when something is off track and what's the escalation route?
Okay.
Well, Andrew's here to pick up the first, but I'll pick up the second question specifically. So, robust project management really just refers to the governance processes that we have within the operations of the council. Ultimately, on the higher level projects, some of which would be seen here, for example, would sit as part of our corporate programme board. I chair that board. Myself, sitting beneath that board, are several delivery boards which are chaired by the strategic directors. That's how the projects are overseen, and then it's just a standard project methodology in terms of understanding whether a project is on time, on budget, delivered within the quality expectations of it, and ultimately where there is any slippage along the way, those processes are escalated by exception into the board and then onto the corporate strategic board that sits as part of the joint executive.
Okay.
Thank you. I think next question I think you're going to pick up on. Is that right, Rob? Yeah.
I'll pick up the question about budget pressures, if that's okay. One of the things, and we looked at this when we looked at the budget a couple of weeks ago, and the Council holds a range of reserves as part of its financial resilience, process. So those are to deal with things that, as we set an assumption in the budget and in this county plan, things may not plan out as we first thought they would do. So ultimately we have reserves that will cover unexpected bumps in the road in terms of expenditure. But on a more day-to-day basis, the strategic directors are monitoring their budget on a very regular basis, and if there are items that start to slip or slow down or speed up, they will move things within their existing budget to enable them to ensure those things are delivered. But if, as Stephen said, as part of that project management process, it becomes apparent that can't be contained within the original budget envelope, then we'll look at using reserves to address those pressures as they come apparent. But I will be very clear with strategic directors, if they're using reserves, they need to think about how they're repaying those reserves in the future to top the pot back up.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you for that. I've sort of narrowed mine down a bit here now. I mean, other than I've got 25 questions in all, but I will ask just one more. I'm mindful of time and people's time. Have trade unions been engaged, and have there been any areas of challenge or disagreement?
Okay, who'd like to take that?
Yeah, trade unions are engaged in all of our activities as part of our social partnership with them. And no, they've not raised any particular concerns. Certainly not that I'm aware of.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, and thank you for your consideration, Councillor Haynes. And so I'll move on to a question from Councillor Haller.
Thank you, Chair. Culture and heritage. You talk about working with partners on heritage trails, tourism opportunities, to promoting our visitors' attractions as a single destination. How are we going to achieve that?
Okay, I think David Leach will come back on that.
Yeah, it's multifaceted. So there's existing programmes that members will be aware of where members provide support through the cultural grants, which we provide to some of our key cultural venues. In the emerging Blueprint for Growth, which is that broader economic development and heritage strategy, that will start to set out that strategic context for how we're going to improve heritage and tourism offers in particular. There will then be an action plan that sits behind that. That action plan will be developed in this coming year. So existing activity plus new planned activity in the action plan, but that will be developed this year.
Okay, hope that helps.
I'll just come back on that one.
Okay.
So in view of what you've just said, is it now time to start looking at a tourism heritage officer to cover the whole of the borough?
I think in the context of the conversations we've been having around the deal and the other conversations that we've been having today, the conversations we've had as a joint exec team is, can we think slightly differently from the traditional approaches that have taken place? That tourism heritage function, when it existed before, didn't achieve the sort of step change that we would have expected and we would have hoped for in that tourism environment. So certainly a conversation around the best delivery mechanism, but I would ask for a conversation around what the best way of delivering that is, because it may well not be an individual officer embedded within the council to do it. We know, for example, that some of our partners are operating in this space and could do more, and so it would be worth a conversation with them about could we support them to do more in this space to promote tourism. That doesn't mean do it with existing resources. There is definitely a conversation to have around resourcing, but the delivery model I would suggest we look at before jumping straight to appointing an officer.
Okay, that sounds clear. So thank you for that. I'll bring in Councillor Ashley and then Councillor Evans. So Councillor Ashley.
Sorry, Dave. Sorry. Can I just come back on that, please? Sorry, I was on mute.
Apologies.
Is that possible? No, it's my fault because I was on mute. Dave, I welcome your views, but we've seen a dramatic change in the north since the heritage officers disappeared off the radar within Torvine. We've seen a decline in everything in the north that relates to heritage, and I get the fact that we need to look in modern ways, but sometimes the old ways do work. Right now in the north, we're talking about Heritage Day. We're struggling even to get a committee together. If we had a coordinating officer, maybe that might help the situation.
Can I just suggest that this is perhaps dropping into detail?
Sorry.
Perhaps this can be taken up outside the meeting. David
Sure.
Leach has indicated a willingness to do that, so I will move us on. Thank you very much, Councillor Haller.
Can you take me, because my hand's gone off, but I was there.
Yep, I'm mindful that you're next, Councillor Ashley, followed by Councillor.
Thank you, David. Right, couple of the housing questions, and then I've got an environmental one. Percentage of new homes built that are affordable, it's got 30%. How are we going to get to that? Followed by empty properties action plan. Empty properties voids. And then the other one was on where was it? Biodiversity. Whether we're in line with that. They're all, but that's got December 26th on it. Have we actually met that? Wellbeing objective 26 is actually, December 26th. No, that is next year, isn't it? So there's a couple of quite disparate questions there. I can go back to the biodiversity one. It's the housing questions that are interesting.
Okay. Just to say to members, if people can reference the page, that's quite helpful. David Leach is happy to respond.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you. Yeah, just to explain in terms of that target for 30%, it is an ambitious target, but it's an ambitious target because it's an important target and an important area that I know members want us to focus. That's built up with a combination of sites developed by developers, where there is a proportion of affordable housing. That, as members will know, particularly those on planning committee, that varies site by site depending on the viability of those sites, but can range anywhere from 5% to 20%. There are other schemes then where the public sector, particularly Welsh Government, are in ownership of the land, where they're seeking a higher percentage through their negotiations on land value. And then there are those 100% affordable housing sites that we bring forward as windfall sites, so where there is land that becomes available in the public sector to deliver entirely through a housing association. The combination of those are what gets us to that 30% target. That's been a long-standing target based on the mix that's come forward traditionally. In terms of our activities around empty properties, there is work going on between finance and housing at the minute to look at resourcing empty properties activity, not only on the enforcement side, but on the support side. So how do we better link up enforcement action with the grants and support we have available for landlords looking to bring empty properties back into action? On top of that, there is still transactional capital from Welsh Government, the TACP fund, which again allows the RSLs to bring empty properties back forward. So those are the main lines of delivery, and that's the basis on which the target was set for housing numbers.
Yeah, then I'm going on to a bit that I'm interested in as well, being sustainability champion, which is the how we get with a deal regarding embedding biodiversity considerations to day-to-day activities. I know that's a bit of it's a difficult one to measure, but it's always useful to hear what your plans are on that, Dave. This is page 12.
Okay, so around biodiversity.
I think the easiest thing to do around those specific lines is in part to look at because I think it's important to put this plan in the context of the mission deliveries as well as the service delivery plan. So this is not a standalone plan in terms of all the council's activity, referring back to Councillor Haynes' point in the first questions. So I think that those plans will be picked up as part of our ongoing delivery plans, and it's probably best to look at those specifically, Councillor, rather than try to address lines here individually one by one.
No, I take your point, Chief Executive. It's just you get questions about, like it's been raining for the last 5 weeks, things are growing or not growing. I get questions like that in my role, wondering where we're going with it. So that does address that issue. We also have other issues where people have those kind of biodiversity questions. So it's not unreasonable for me to ask you that question.
Okay, I think there are specifics. Then that's fair enough to put some of those through. But as I say, we are trying to seek the totality. I think I think some of those detailed questions I would recommend that members, and I know Councillor Haynes had other questions. So I think that if those could sensibly be put down and submitted, that could be quite helpful in terms of taking an analysis of this. So thank you for that. I'll pass to Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Chair. Mine's regard pages 55 and 56 before we go to that. Now, the council is supporting all areas of the boroughs in every ward, but my concern is how we put the additional support, particularly in areas of socio-economic factors, you know, deprivation, you know, single-parent families. How much more time and financial pressures will that put under the county plan? That's what I wanted to ask. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I think that ties in with the question that was asked in relation to the deal and actually how we focus in. There was a question that was raised. So I'll give David Leach the opportunity to respond. Thank you.
Absolutely. It's really important that we get the right type of support to the right places at the right time. The support mix that we need, this is where it links into the deal, will differ from place to place, so each place will need a different mix of support. And it's really important to bring it back to those principles identified through the deal of building up that pool of universal support, so that great work around volunteering, which, Councillor Evans, I know in your area is particularly strong around some of those communities in Thornhill. How do we start to grow that activity? And then how do we use the targeted resources that we've got, so those targeted prevention programmes where there's gaps in that provision? That's what will allow us to really focus in and hone in on those areas of deprivation, is growing that resource pool of universal services and then using the targeted resources more effectively. What we're doing in the year ahead, it goes back to Stephen's point about the mission plans, is really looking at that universal, targeted and specialist offer. And we can look at that area by area. That's entirely appropriate for us to look at that area by area so that we've got that full understanding that between them the support mix is right in each area. And that may be something that you'd want to consider putting back to us.
Okay, is that helpful, Councillor Evans?
Yeah, it's just that what I'm trying to get at is not areas the same fit as every other area. Yeah. We all got differences within our own areas. I'm just trying to, you know, specify the differences in certain wards. That was all. Yeah. So yeah, no, thank you, David, for that answer.
Yeah, I think that's helpful. That's great. So I've got Councillor Rose Seaborn next, and then Councillor Lucy Williams, and then Councillor Liz Haynes. So, Councillor Seaborn.
Thank you, Chair. My points are relating to page 60 and 61 and its skills, and there's a huge workforce out there that on low pay, and I have spoken to some people about it, but there are people in the borough that have actually taken low paid jobs and can't afford to give them up for any particular reason. And I just wondered whether or not we could help upskill that element of the workforce. And it's in our partners, it's in our care system, it's in most of the partners areas where they have their lowest paid, and whether or not we could actually look to upskill our low-paid workers if appropriate. I mean, I gave an example of childcare and the fact that they can't give up their work to do a night class or another educational programme. I just wondered whether there was an opportunity to put that into our county plan.
Yeah, I think it's a very helpful point, and I know David Leach would like to respond.
Yes, absolutely. I think it's a brilliant suggestion, certainly something that we can look to build into certainly the delivery plans, which is where that level of detail comes in, those service plans. There's two areas, I think, within that for us to look at. One is the adult and community learning offer, and how do we make that available during the daytime, not just the evening. We know we get a lot of feedback for evening classes, but we've got quite a robust programme of those. So there's certainly a conversation to have around the upskilling offer in the daytime for people who are working. That needs a conversation with their employers, of which we are one. And we need to factor that in as well in terms of our own upskilling of our own workforce. And the final bit for me that I think we need to reflect on is the career pathways that exist within some of those sectors you mentioned around care. That is a piece of work that we're doing specifically in relation to reablement and the pathway into therapies from the reablement workforce that we're hoping to have completed in the coming financial year. So whilst you may not see that level of detail in the county plan, please be assured it is something that the teams are actively working on at the minute.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Again, I will note, colleagues, that I know we're going past 4 o'clock, but there are questions going, so I will continue to run. Councillor Williams in the chamber.
Thank you, Chair. My question is in relation to wellbeing objective number 3. We will tackle inequality by focusing on early identification, etc. Particularly bearing in mind that we're trying to align this much more with the deal and with prevention and community engagement. I wonder if within that section there could be a little bit more focus on the role, following on from my colleague's question, that the local hubs do have. Because, so an example would be a more specific referral and use of the resilience teams, because one of the things that we find in our local hub is that people don't have a full awareness of the benefits they can gain. We used to have the facility to refer people to the resilience team, and that's diminished a bit. So I wonder if strengthening that ability to make referrals and for people to get advice in a more timely way, we could just use the community hubs in a more proactive way. And that would also be a way of also engaging our citizens panels, because they're all linked to a local area.
Yeah, I think that's clear. And David Leach would like to come back.
Yeah, entirely agree. I think the community capacity builders fulfil a very different role from the resilience workers that we used to have employed. That's really important because it allows us to build up that universal offer that will build resilience over time. What we don't want to do is leave a gap in that broad information, advice and signposting. I think the hubs are a great opportunity for us to do that. And I wonder if we wrap around that some support to those hubs and the community leaders within them around what their community offer looks like. Where do they signpost people who may be at that point in crisis? Absolutely something we can consider.
Thank you.
I think that's clear. Okay. Then I have Councillor Haynes and then Councillor Ashley. Councillor Haynes.
Thank you, Chair. I've whittled them down to half a dozen. Under Wellbeing Objective 2, what practical steps are we taking to reduce reliance on independent fostering agencies? And then the other one within that is free school meals uptake. What's stopping us reaching the 75%, and how are we addressing those barriers or stigmas?
Okay, thank you. I think doing 2 questions at a time is helpful, so David Leach would like to respond.
Yes, I'll come back as best I can. Apologies from Jason O'Brien in advance on this. Jason's on leave today, so I may need to get you some more information afterwards, certainly in relation to free school meals, but just in relation to the fostering question. There is a lot of work going on that's going to grow into the new financial year around the campaigns, the coordinated campaigns that we run on social media and that we run through roadshows, public presentations, banners, information out into community hubs to really grow that really important role that local authority foster carers play. I think we need to emphasise the value that local authority foster carers have within our system, and that's certainly an area that I know Jason is looking really strongly at for this year. So that activity primarily relates to comms campaigning, but making sure that those campaigns are effective at emphasising the value of local authority foster workers. And apologies, Councillor Haynes, I will have to get someone to come back to you on the free school meal question.
No, that's fine, Dave. That's absolutely fine. My next question is on Wellbeing Objective 5, and it's the new recycling facility. It's a major project. What are the financial risks, and how confident are we about staying on track? That's that one. And then Wellbeing Objective 8 and 9. Introducing AI into Coal Torfaen. What safeguards are in place to protect vulnerable residents and ensure quality isn't compromised?
Yep, I think that's helpful. So, David again.
Yes, back to me again, Councillor. In relation to Wellbeing Objective 5, in terms of confidence in staying on track, that's where the importance of the Programme Management Office processes kick in. So this project has been identified as one of our core strategic projects that will be tracked and monitored through that Programme Management Office support and help that comes through that. You're right, it will be a project that has a degree of finance attached to it and a significant degree potentially. So that will be developed by the project team now. they will bring that through the appropriate channels. So because it gets that PMO support, it will come into the Corporate Portfolio Board that Stephen mentioned earlier that he chairs to give that assurance on development, and it will then come back into Cabinet and Council at the appropriate time as and when there are requests for that funding. Equally, I would imagine that would be the sort of project that the relevant scrutiny committee may well look to select for further scrutiny activity during that year.
Okay.
In relation to AI into Call Torfaen, this is a project that's in its infancy at the minute, but it's one that we want to deliver at pace in the new financial year. It all comes down to the way that calls are routed when they come into the call centre, and apologies for the technical explanation, but when a call comes through into the call centre, it goes into various queues depending on what the content is that that individual wants to speak to us on. The triage process within that queue, we can have AI assist within that space, and that's exactly what we're looking to develop now. So a lot of that signposting activity, an AI assistant can do. That may be very distinct from the role that an AI-only system operates. At the minute, we're scoping out what the right roles are for an AI assistant, as opposed to where else does AI play a role within that call centre. Again, I suggest this may be one that once the project scope has been developed, it either comes in for a seminar or a further cross-cutting scrutiny session at that point.
I know for me it'd be something that I'd really want to hone in on and oversee, because I think it could go very wrong or it could go very right. Okay, and my sort of last question is quite broad. If we're sitting here this time next year, what would success genuinely look like, and what will have changed for residents in tangible terms?
Okay, if we could read a crystal ball, that would be wonderful, wouldn't it? But I'll give the officers a chance to give their perspectives. David, and then if Andrew, you want to add anything?
It is called a plan for a reason. So this should be some sort of idea.
Yeah.
Absolutely. No, I think that it's a really fair question. So in terms of the change overall, we want to be seeing a reduction in those health inequalities that are linked to Marmot. And that's why that Marmot planning over time is important. But I don't expect that we'll see significant shift in those indicators overnight. Those are the sort of areas that take, if not a few years, potentially a decade or a generation. So just to be clear that there's an element of indicator there that we need to track, that we'd hope to see impact on. What would good look like in relation to the conclusion of the annual delivery plan? Well, it would look like most of those activities being delivered and delivered successfully, and each of those indicators will either give you a target or a completion date. So that will set out what success looks like for each individual line of activity. The reason that those lines of activity have been selected is because they make that contribution towards that wellbeing objective under Marmot. So what we're saying is that if we get this right and we get this delivered in the way that we're describing to you, over time we should expect to see those health equity indicators moving. The only other element to add is what Neil spoke about earlier, to do a sentiment analysis, and that's particularly linked into the way that we deliver these activities. So not only do we want to understand have we done what we said we were going to do, we want to understand how did we do it? Did the way that we deliver those services matter in terms of building ownership, improving trust, delivering on the objectives that residents have, as much as just being able to say we have completed that activity. So that sentiment analysis will be another critical indicator that we'll keep an eye on throughout the course. So that's what success will look like: plan delivered, outcomes achieved within the plan, and sentiment analysis improvement.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you for that. I hope that's okay, Councillor Haynes. Is that your last question, or anything further?
All done.
Thank you very much. I just want to check. I think Rebecca wanted to come in briefly.
Sorry, Jay. Thank you, members. Yeah, I just wanted to obviously emphasise to members and touch on a point that Dave made with regards to going back to the scrutiny committee. So just to highlight that, obviously, this is the overarching plan with the key activities for the year. So these will act as feeders that go to the relevant scrutiny committee. So whereas you may have some questions or concerns about the specifics, just be mindful not to sort of scrutinise those in themselves today. What you're looking at is the plan overall in terms of the key activities, but please be assured that those specific items that you may have raised, such as foster care, etc., would be key feeders that would be considered then by the Children and Families Committee, so they will be addressed.
thank you for that. I think that is an assurance for members. Okay, so I think we have Councillor Ashley and then Councillor Clarkson.
Right. It was on page 18, developed the initial 3-year delivery plans for each of the Torvine placemaking plans. That's Blaenavon, Pontypool and Cwmbran, and commence implementation. The questions on it say develop the plans and then investigate and identify funding to progress. Where are we at with that, please?
Hey.
I think it's Dave again, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. And again, you know, it should be that the targets and milestones are set out. But David, would you like to come back on that?
Yes, I will come in and answer for my colleague here. This would be Christina's portfolio, but I'm happy to come in and give you some information there. So there are placemaking plans that exist for some of the towns, not all, and certainly not in the sense that they're set out in this report. So some of this is building on existing work that's been done previously around placemaking. Others are taking a completely fresh look at those towns. The critical element here from the conversations that Christina and myself have had is starting from a different perspective. It's starting from how do you use your town? What is it that makes you use the space that exists within a town centre rather than what shops do you want, what facilities would you like to see? Because we need to be mindful of planning for the future and planning for the way that people are going to use the space rather than the list of activities that people do currently. So that's my very long-winded way of saying that's why in Q1 you will see those plans being refreshed and coming forward as brand new plans rather than the bits of work that we've already got across all three of those. And Q1 is the deadline for that development.
Could I ask a supplement on that, Dave? Very quick one. With Pontypool and Cwmbran, you've obviously got more than town centres. You've also got secondary centres as well. Are they included in that as well? I'm thinking of Cwmbran and you've got Abersucken and Pont New Ennis and all that in Pontypool and New Inn as well. So do you consider all that as well if you're talking infrastructure?
Okay, David?
It's a really good question. It may be one to put to us again as a recommendation. What we're most keen to do is make sure that the mix of facilities that people access within that wider urban area is available, whether that mix takes place within the core town centre or within district centres or actually embedded within communities. I don't think decisions have been made on yet. So that's certainly an area to direct us to go and look at and to be clear with you on what the boundaries and the scope are of a town centre place plan.
Okay.
I mean, the thing is that above that you've got the Cwmbran town plan, for instance, which is another thing that must skew that. Yeah. In fact, we'll make that recommendation, Dave. Yeah. I'll remember to do that.
Yeah, I think so. I think as Dave has helpfully lined out, you know, we're at the starting stage of actually setting out some plans, and one of the key things I think we need as members is to see those plans in the early stage, so that we have the opportunity to comment on their completeness and sufficiency. So that's perhaps what we can note. So I've got Councillor Clarkson. I think this is the last question. Over to you, Councillor Clarkson.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's looking at wellbeing objective 4, community resilience, is on page 10, and it's the first point, strengthening local emergency preparedness. This is something that's come up in a couple of groups that I've sort of attended, that sort of looks back to some of the situations, COVID and flooding we've had recently, and these type of events where the community are very sort of willing to sort of get involved. So I was just wondering, it's talking about 2 community resilience groups to be established, but we haven't had a lot of information around this. So I was wondering if you could just give us a bit more information so that we can understand it a bit more.
Yeah, I think that's helpful because it's one of those examples where there's perhaps not the clarity. So, David, over to you.
Entirely, as you describe, Councillor Clarkson, that this is to do with communities that have been impacted by a resilience event, essentially. So it's come in light of some of the great work that's been done in a Blaen y Gwent context with CUM and with the community in CUM, and that's been translated in a Torvine context into some early conversations in Pontypool. This forms the bedrock of Mission 5 so that mission within the deal, about how do we speak in a different way with communities so that we can grow the pool of resources that's available to solve that problem when a crisis occurs. I don't believe, though I will get Mark Thomas to clarify for you, that those two areas have been set up and decided, and I also don't think that it's only two areas that we could do. Two is the target for us to achieve, but there's certainly scope for us to look at other opportunities as and when they emerge. So what I'd encourage members to do is, if you've got a willing community that has a resilience issue that they want to come together with the council department and look at dealing with slightly differently, put an inquiry through in members' inquiries, and we'll make sure that gets routed into Mark for his planning around which communities that focuses on. So that's things like flood preparedness, the preparedness in COVID, preparedness if there was a major accident within that community. It's those sort of civil contingencies issues that this target really relates to. Does that help at all, Councillor?
Yeah, it sort of gives a little bit more background. It sort of feels more PSB sort of to me, this type of question. But it is something that, you know, the public, whenever we have any sort of weather events, you know, the public are very quick to step forward. And it just seems like there's a lot of partnership working could be brought forward from this. So it's about sort of maybe us having more information as Mark Thomas sort of develops this, and having a look at it again, maybe through some scrutiny later on in the year.
Apologies. Sorry. Be too quick with the button there, apologies. I know that it's been picked up by the PSB, Councillor Clarkson, and there have been a couple of resilience workshops, another two coming up. We're looking at sort of the Gwent climate risk assessment. I strongly feel that it should be something that comes to members, so it's one thing we can consider for recommendations as we go on to the next stage. But just to reassure you, there have been some discussions that are cross-partner that are actually starting to pull this together for information and prioritisation to come to community.
Yeah, I sort of agree. It would be something that members need to look at as this sort of grows and develops, because you know, we would be part of the communication strategy had should it need to be implemented on any sort of community event. Yeah, brilliant recommendation. Thanks.
And David would like to add a couple of points as well. David Leach.
Just very quickly to suggest again, like Rebecca mentioned earlier, this may be one to consider through the Environment Scrutiny Committee specifically, so that that deep dive work from a scrutiny perspective can be done and achieved there.
Yeah, thanks.
That's great. So thank you very much. I see no more questions. So can I thank the officers for their contributions, and now invite members to consider the scrutiny activity when we put forward our recommendations. What we were asked to do was to consider the information contained in the appendices to the report, assess whether the key activities planned and set out in the delivery plan will sufficiently meet the ambitions set within the county plan, and we've had a few suggestions made, determine whether the service planning process has been suitably shaped with consideration of the deal, and then thirdly, making clear comments or recommendations to the executive member, corporate governance and performance on that draft county plan delivery plan. Members, are you happy if we now let the officers go and we can deliberate on our recommendations? Yep. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Yes, thank you very much for your contributions, all. We're letting them escape now, so I'll give you a moment or two. Right. Thank you, members, and can I remind you the meeting is still in formal proceedings and as such is still being webcast. So, members, do we have any further recommendation we'd like to highlight relating to the first report? And do we have any recommendations on the county plan delivery report? I'll open it up for members to highlight any key points. Councillor Seaborn?
Yeah, just the county plan with the upskilling of our low-paid workforce and our partners' low-paid workforce. I'd like to put a recommendation in that we and other partners look at upskilling our lower-paid workforce.
Thank you. That's clear and that's noted. Any other members want to come in?
Can I come in there quickly, Chair?
Okay.
Councillor Seaborn, if it's all right, we'll reference that in terms of being emphasising the delivery plans that sit under that. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, that's my words on my piece of paper, Bex.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So we've had a couple of things that have been suggested as seminars for members, and we've had a few things that have been suggested that get passed on to scrutiny committees for forward consideration. So we'll note that, particularly in the latter of the last one, and the reduction in health equalities. But members, anything else you want to highlight?
Yeah, I've just put my hand up.
Okay, Councillor Ashley.
Yeah, sorry, I was taking a phone call at the time. It was the town placemaking plans where Dave Leach suggested we go ahead with looking at the outliers for places like Cwmbran and Pontypool.
Okay, so we want clarification as to the extent and range for those plans. I think fair point. Yep, we can put that down.
I also brought up something on housing. I don't know whether that warranted. That's more like seminar country, isn't it?
I think we'd highlight that as perhaps a recommendation that we actually get some update in a housing seminar on the take-up and use of empty properties. I think was the question you had, wasn't it? Councillor Ashley?
Empty properties and build, wasn't it? It was kind of planning committee type thing.
Okay. All right. Thank you. We'll note that.
Yeah.
Any other points from members? Councillor Evans?
Yeah, just going on what Councillor Williams has said earlier on about, could we word something about putting in about something for the resilience and support for people within communities?
Yes, I think we noted that making full use of the existing community hubs and using some of the resilience resource there to access. So I know Geraint's made a note of that. So, yep, okay.
Excellent. Yeah, brilliant. Thank you.
Sorry, my mic's off again. I'm in a in-between stage with vision, so that's why my glasses are off, so I can see close, but I can't see far. Apologies for that, members. Right, I see no more hands, so are you happy? We'll try and summarise what we've got briefly. Geraint, you're happy to quickly summarise the points here?
Yes, Chair. In terms of the county plan that we've just gone through now, in terms of recommendations for that, I've got about the upskilling of our and our partners' low-paid workforce, adding that as a comment regarding it sitting within the delivery plans underneath. In terms of the town placemaking plans, clarification as to the extent and range of those plans. Housing with regards to empty properties and builds, the suggestion, I'll put that within the comments as well about the seminar. And then we've got the local hubs. I've got about the delivery mechanism within the corporate plan, talking about the resilience side of that.
Okay. All right, colleagues. Are you happy we've captured some points? Yep. Rebecca?
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, members, if I can just come in quickly. I'm conscious of time pressures with the recommendations feeding from the deal report into a cabinet report that may be being dispatched tomorrow. So we will get those recommendations to you as soon as possible, but it may not be until early tomorrow morning. So we would really appreciate it if you could keep an eye out for those in your inbox and perhaps get any comments to us by mid-afternoon tomorrow, if that would be possible. I do apologise about the short timescale there for you.
Okay, no, thank you for that. So essentially we'll focus in on the deal bits as for comments. The other one will take a little bit more time. So thank you for that. So I think then, colleagues, we come to item 6, which is the date of next meeting. Next meeting of Cross-Cutting Resources and Business Overview and Scrutiny Committee will be Thursday the 25th of June, when members will be scrutinising the performance framework for community councils. And obviously there may be some changes to roles before then. So can I thank members and officers for attending and contributing, and I will now close the meeting. Thank you very much, everyone.